Failure is a word that carries weight. It often sounds like an ending. Like the final nail in the coffin of an attempt that did not work out. Yet, if we look at the story of SpaceX, we see something radically different. Failure there was not an ending at all. It was a beginning. The rockets that exploded, the launches that collapsed, the humiliations that played out on the global stage, they were not signals to give up. They became catalysts. They became the very fuel that propelled innovation forward. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is the literal truth of how progress is made. Every malfunction revealed the hidden truth of engineering flaws. Every crash forced a confrontation with overlooked details. And every disaster offered a chance to learn something that could not have been discovered otherwise. Think about what that really means. Most of us spend our lives running from failure, terrified of embarrassment, afraid of what people will say if we fall short. But Musk and his team leaned into failure as if it were a teacher. They did not hide from it. They studied it, dissected it, and used it as raw material. There is an important psychological shift here. Failure is not simply a negative experience to be endured. It is information. It is feedback from reality. And reality, when treated with respect, always points us toward a higher form of order, toward solutions we would never have reached if everything had gone smoothly the first time. Philosophically, this idea is profound. We live in a culture obsessed with success stories, yet success without the crucible of failure is hollow. It lacks depth. It lacks resilience. When Musk says that failure is an option, but not learning from failure is not, he is pointing to a principle as old as human struggle itself. Human beings are not designed to get everything right the first time. We are designed to adapt, to test, to fall, to recalibrate, and then to rise again with more clarity and strength than before. Without failure, there is no adaptation. Without adaptation, there is no growth. The rockets that blew up were not dead ends. They were stepping stones. Each disaster carried within it the seed of the next breakthrough. This is not a romantic notion, it is practical reality. For instance, when Falcon 1 failed 3 times, the company was on the verge of collapse. Most people would have seen those failures as final. Investors walked away, critics laughed, and even loyal supporters began to doubt. Yet those 3 failures contained the exact data SpaceX needed to launch the 4th rocket successfully. That success opened the door to NASA contracts, which in turn funded the creation of Falcon 9 and later Falcon Heavy. Without those initial failures, none of what followed would have been possible. What can we take from this? In our own lives, failure often feels unbearable because we see it only in the moment. We forget to place it in the larger story. Failure is not a verdict. It is a process. It is the burning away of illusions, the destruction of what does not work, so that something stronger can emerge. That is why innovation, whether in technology, art, or personal growth, requires not only intelligence, but also courage. The courage to endure failure, to treat it as a friend rather than an enemy. There is also something deeply psychological about how Musk approached failure. Instead of internalizing it as a reflection of his worth, he externalized it as a problem to be solved. Most people collapse when they confuse personal identity with external outcomes. If your project fails, you start believing you are a failure. That confusion kills resilience. Musk's approach shows us the alternative. Detach your identity from the outcome and let failure become a teacher instead of a judge. This shift in mindset liberates you to keep experimenting, keep pushing, keep building, even when the world doubts you. In a way, Musk's SpaceX story is a mirror of human development itself. As children, we learn to walk by falling over and over again. We do not call a child a failure because they stumble. We recognize that falling is the necessary path to balance. Yet as adults, we forget this truth. We label failure as shameful. Forgetting that it is the same process that gave us the ability to stand in the first place. SpaceX reminds us of this forgotten wisdom. Progress is a dance with failure, and each misstep brings us closer to mastery. So the lesson here is clear, and it is universal. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the foundation of success. The rockets that broke apart in the sky were not defeats. They were messages. They whispered, look deeper. Learn faster, adapt harder. If you carry that perspective into your own life, you will no longer fear failure. You will recognize it as an ally disguised as an enemy, as a hidden doorway to the very growth you are seeking. And perhaps that is the real transformative lesson from SpaceX. Every failure, no matter how painful, contains the blueprint of its own redemption. The only question is whether we have the courage to look closely enough to see it. Failure, then, is not the end of the story. It is the forge where resilience and innovation are born. Perseverance is one of those words we throw around casually, but when you really step into the reality of what it means, it becomes something far more brutal and far more magnificent. I want to feel like Elon Musk's story during the early years of SpaceX is not just a tale of rockets and engineering. It is a psychological study of what it means to persist when the entire world seems to be against you. Imagine pouring everything you have, your money, your reputation, your time, into a vision that most people consider impossible, and then watching that vision crash in front of cameras, again and again. Most people break under far less pressure. Yet Musk did not simply endure, he doubled down. This is where the psychology of perseverance reveals its depth. The average human response to repeated defeat is withdrawal. Our minds are wired to avoid pain, and nothing cuts deeper than the pain of humiliation, especially when it happens in public. Musk faced not just technical failures, but waves of mockery from the press, skepticism from investors, and even whispers from his closest allies suggesting he walk away. The psychological weight of such opposition can crush ambition. But what kept him moving forward was not blind stubbornness. It was a conscious decision to redefine what failure meant. To Musk, those rocket explosions were not proof that he was unfit to lead SpaceX. They were simply part of the process. There is a lesson here for all of us. Perseverance is not the absence of pain or doubt. It is the decision to act despite them. Psychologically, it means you do not measure your worth against temporary outcomes, but against your ability to keep standing in the storm. That is the essence of resilience. It is easy to hold your head high when things are going well. But when everything collapses, when people whisper about your foolishness, when even your own inner voice starts to echo their doubts, that is the battlefield where perseverance proves its power. Philosophically, perseverance can be seen as a confrontation with chaos. Life is filled with uncertainty, and when we step into something truly ambitious, we inevitably enter territory where the outcome is unknown. What am? Most people retreat because uncertainty feels like danger, but Musk leaned into it. Am. He embodied the principle that order is not born by avoiding chaos, but by wrestling with it. Each failure was chaotic, unpredictable, humiliating, but in facing it directly, he extracted order, knowledge, and clarity. This is what perseverance does. It transforms chaos into wisdom, provided you have the courage to remain in the fight. Now, perseverance is often misunderstood as sheer willpower, the ability to grit your teeth and hold on. But Musk's story teaches us that it is also about adaptation. After every failed launch, he and his team did not simply try the same thing again. They analyzed, recalibrated, and improved. What Perseverance without adaptation is stubbornness. Perseverance with adaptation is growth. What It is the kind of psychological resilience that builds stronger foundations with every setback. That is why his persistence was not wasted energy. It was a compounding force that transformed fragile attempts into world-changing achievements. Think for a moment about the pressure he faced personally. By the time the third Falcon 1 rocket failed, SpaceX was on the brink of bankruptcy. Musk had poured in the last of his fortune. What He was simultaneously watching Tesla bleed money. He was divorced, criticized, and ridiculed as a reckless dreamer. What Most people would see such a situation as the end of the road. But for Musk, it became the crucible. Instead of folding, he placed the last of his resources into one more launch. That decision, driven by perseverance at its breaking point, made the difference between collapse and triumph. The fourth rocket succeeded, and the trajectory of SpaceX changed forever. What is striking here is the psychological resilience required to place everything on the line again after 3 public failures. Most of us struggle to recover from a single defeat in our personal lives. We allow rejection, a failed project, or a setback to define us for years. Yet Musk faced repeated public humiliation on a scale few can imagine. And still chose to persist. This shows us that perseverance is not about comfort. It is about identity. Who you believe yourself to be determines how far you will go when everything falls apart. If you see yourself as someone who cannot quit, then quitting simply does not appear as an option. Musk believed so deeply in his mission that perseverance was not something he occasionally chose. It was the only path available to him. And here lies the universal truth. Perseverance is not reserved for visionaries or billionaires. It is a principle available to anyone willing to reframe failure and embrace the storm. Your challenges may not involve rockets or space travel, but they will involve setbacks, rejections, and doubts. The question is not whether those will come. They always do. The question is whether you will persist long enough to let those failures become your teachers instead of your tombstones. The story of Musk's perseverance reminds us that the deepest victories are often born in the moments when quitting looks most reasonable. It is easy to persist when the world applauds you. The transformative power comes when you persist while the world laughs. True perseverance is not just endurance. It is the courageous decision to transform defeat into momentum. When we look at the story of SpaceX, what becomes clear is that Elon Musk's perseverance was not fueled simply by stubbornness or by pride. It was rooted in something far deeper, a vision that stretched far beyond the immediate struggle. He was not building rockets just to prove his critics wrong or to satisfy his own ego. He was working toward an idea that transcended personal ambition. The belief that humanity must become a multiplanetary species to secure its survival. That vision was the anchor that allowed him to endure storms that would have broken almost anyone else. There is a psychological truth hidden here. When your mission is small, your pain feels enormous. But when your mission is vast, your pain shrinks in comparison. Musk faced bankruptcy, ridicule, technical collapse, and near total defeat. But his vision of building a future where human beings could travel beyond Earth gave those struggles meaning. Pain without meaning becomes unbearable. Pain with meaning becomes endurance. That is why people who suffer for something greater than themselves can withstand almost any hardship. Musk's vision gave him the capacity to transform suffering into fuel. Think about the difference between focusing on immediate problems and focusing on a transcendent purpose. If Musk had measured his success only by whether a rocket launched perfectly on a given day, he would have quit after the first or second failure. By that measure, he was a disaster. But because his focus was not on the individual failures, but on the larger trajectory of humanity's future, each setback became tolerable. He could frame them not as ends, but as steps on the path towards something immense. This illustrates a crucial psychological principle. The why must be bigger than the how. If the why is compelling enough, you will find the strength to endure the setbacks that inevitably come with the how. There is also a philosophical element here. Most people live with short-term horizons. They seek comfort, approval, or small victories in the present. But a vision that transcends the present creates a different kind of resilience. It allows you to see beyond temporary chaos. Musk's ability to endure years of ridicule and collapse was grounded in his orientation toward a future that most people could not yet see. He was willing to suffer today because he believed the future required it. That willingness to suffer for a larger cause is the mark of someone who is not merely surviving life, but shaping it. And this is not only true for billionaires and entrepreneurs, it is true for all of us. When your struggles feel overwhelming, often it is not because the struggles are uniquely unbearable. It is because the vision that carries you is too small. If you live only for comfort or approval, any difficulty feels like an existential threat. But if you live for a purpose larger than yourself, whether it is to raise a child, build a community, create art, or serve humanity, then setbacks take on a different meaning. They are not meaningless pain. They are part of the sacred cost of pursuing something extraordinary. Musk's story also reveals something vital about leadership. A vision is not just personal. It inspires others to endure alongside you. SpaceX engineers worked under impossible pressure, often unpaid, often exhausted, because they, too, believed in the mission. They were not simply building rockets for a paycheck. They were building the possibility of humanity's survival beyond Earth. That vision turned ordinary work into something transcendent. Leaders who anchor their efforts in something larger than themselves create a ripple effect of resilience that spreads through everyone around them. The third rocket failure could have ended everything. Investors fled. Resources dried up. Skepticism turned to mockery. Yet Musk pressed forward because he saw those failures in the light of his larger mission. If humanity's survival depended on escaping Earth's limitations, then quitting was never an option. The short-term embarrassment and financial strain paled in comparison to the long-term consequences of abandoning the mission. In this way, his vision functioned as a compass. No matter how violent the storm, the compass pointed toward the same destination, and that destination gave him the courage to keep walking. The principle here is simple but profound. You cannot withstand the trials of life if your purpose is small. If your only goal is to avoid pain, you will quit the moment pain arrives. If your only goal is to impress others, you will quit the moment they mock you. But if your goal is bound to something larger, something that transcends you, then you will keep moving even when the ground beneath you is collapsing. Musk's vision did not eliminate suffering, but it gave suffering a context. And in that context, suffering was transformed into sacrifice, and sacrifice into progress. This is the transformative lesson. Do not measure your life only by the comfort of the present moment. Orient yourself toward a vision that stretches far beyond today, and suddenly today's chaos becomes bearable. Musk's ability to hold on to the image of a multiplanetary future is what allowed him to rise above failures that would have destroyed others. When your vision is greater than your struggle becomes the path to your vision. Resilience is often spoken of as if it were a rare gift, something possessed only by a select few. Great leaders, daring visionaries, extraordinary individuals like Elon Musk. But the truth is that resilience is not reserved for the elite. It is not a trait bestowed only upon billionaires or innovators. It is a universal principle, woven into the very fabric of human life, available to every single one of us if we choose to embrace it. The story of SpaceX is powerful not because it shows what Musk could do, because it reflects back to us what we, too, are capable of when faced with our own failures and hardships. Think for a moment about the essence of resilience. It is not simply the ability to recover after being knocked down. It is the decision to stand up again, even when every part of you is screaming to stay down. It is the willingness to continue when logic, fear, and exhaustion tell you it is safer to stop. Resilience does not deny suffering. It acknowledges it fully and still moves forward. That is why it feels so deeply human. Life itself is structured around this pattern. Growth through struggle, strength through resistance, wisdom through mistakes. When Musk and SpaceX endured those rocket explosions, they were not just technical failures. They were mirrors of the struggles we all face: the collapsed business, the broken relationship, the rejection, the dream that seemed to slip away just when we were closest to it. These failures feel different in scale, but they share the same essence. They are moments when life confronts us with the question, will you give in or will you grow? The rockets remind us that resilience is not about pretending failure never happened. It is about transforming failure into a stepping stone rather than a gravestone. Psychologically, resilience requires a reorientation of perspective. Instead of interpreting setbacks as proof that you are inadequate, you must see them as evidence that you are in the process of becoming stronger. Musk could have looked at each rocket crash as a sign that he was foolish or incapable. Instead, he framed them as necessary trials in pursuit of a mission worth every sacrifice. That mindset shift is available to anyone. If you view failure as a reflection of your identity, it will crush you. If you view it as feedback, it will build you. Philosophically, resilience ties to one of the oldest truths in human history, meaning is born from struggle. Every great myth, Every story of human triumph is built upon the hero's confrontation with failure and chaos. SpaceX failures fit into that universal pattern. They are a modern myth of fire and steel, reminding us that progress comes not from perfection, but from persistence. The principle is as relevant in the quiet battles of everyday life as it is in the headlines of technological innovation. Resilience is also contagious. Musk's refusal to quit ignited resilience in his team. They worked through exhaustion and despair because they saw their leader enduring the same struggles with unrelenting commitment. This is a reminder that our resilience is never just our own. The way we face adversity teaches those around us how to face their own. When you endure hardship with courage, you give permission for others to do the same. In this sense, resilience is not only personal, it is communal, a shared strength that binds people together in the face of struggle. And here is the most important truth. Resilience is a choice. It is not something you are born with or without. It is not dictated by your background, your wealth, or your circumstances. It is a decision you make, often in the quiet, private moments when no one is watching, when it would be easier to quit. Musk chose resilience not because he was guaranteed success, but because quitting was simply incompatible with his vision. You too can make that choice. Every time life knocks you down, you are confronted with the same fork in the road to surrender or resilience. The failures of SpaceX may feel distant from our daily lives, but the principle behind them is universal. Whether you are facing financial struggles, personal loss, academic setbacks, or professional rejection, the truth remains the same. Resilience is the key that transforms defeat into growth. It is the discipline that turns suffering into strength. It is the courage that allows ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. So the lesson we take from Musk's failures is not just about rockets or space exploration. It is about what it means to be human, to fall, to struggle, to doubt, and yet to rise again, stronger than before. That is the story of SpaceX, and it can be the story of each of us if we choose it. Resilience is not a privilege of the few. It is the birthright of us all, waiting for the moment when we decide to claim it.